Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Love Learns. We're back again with the Love is Blind Season 7 series, which we're so excited to talk about again. The last episode was on Nick and Hannah, and in this episode we're going to be talking about Marissa and Ramses, with a little bit of Broden, because I think you can't talk about Marissa without Broden, because they were a love triangle. So yeah, let's start off in the pods. In the pods, we don't really see their first dates. We don't see Marissa and Broden's first date. We don't see Marissa and Ramses' first date. We see them in, I think, a few dates in, we see them. We see that Marissa she's a lawyer now, a law student, and she is currently in school, training to be a lawyer, and Ramses is also like in retail, really. Marissa is very much very much from the bat. She's very energetic, has a lot of personality. She's very loud and colourful, and she really lights up the room when she comes into it. And every time she left the room when she was speaking to Broden, they would have like a whoop whoop kind of moment. And every time she came into the room with Ramses always spoke to her in Spanish, and kind of just had a vibe of, okay, something different, something new. We see in her very first we see Marissa and Broden's very first date in episode 2, when they are just talking about how they met in the they've met in the previous one. They're both in the military. They talk about different parts of how they relate, and them reading books together, and over and over and over again in Marissa and Broden's dates, there's always a conversation around, oh, we're pretty much the same people. We're the same people because they like very similar things and were very aligned in some of their beliefs and ideals, which was great conversation starters, and you could see they really flowed in their conversation. Whereas with Ramses, we see them talk more about like how he's feeling about her and his emotions and gender roles. I know we only get to see a snippet of their dates. We don't see all of them. As I said, we didn't even see the first dates for these guys. So we don't really know how in depth they go into their conversations, but we do see some of their fears. We see some of their interactions. And in the triangle, we can do a little bit of comparison between Marissa's dates with Broden and Marissa's dates with Ramses. She tend to have, in the pods anyway, it seemed like she had a type which was someone who had been an immigrant from another country, migrated from another country to the US. We've seen them both being married before and divorced, and we see they both grew up in very religious backgrounds. Same like her, she also had a religious background, so I think she related to them on those kinds of beliefs and values. And they're also very progressive men. And when I say progressive men, I think both of them had different ideals around what progressive men mean. Broden was in the military, so had a military background and tend to be around hyper-masculine men, as Marissa called military men, hyper-masculine men. But he tend to have a more liberal view on women and how women should be in society and things like this, compared to his conservative colleagues in the military. So she felt like that was his idea of progressive, whereas with Ramses, we see his idea of progressive, being a progressive man to be household chores, what you need to be doing in the house, the role of caregiver to the children. We see that kind of progressive nature show up in that role, because he said that he was willing to stay at home if he had a remote job, to stay at home with the kids and look after the kids if she was a lawyer and going off to work. She didn't mind that kind of dynamic within the household. And he was also very open about his ideas around like how she felt about staying at home to like help out around the house. And she was really excited about that idea of him. I don't know if they had more conversations about this, but I think they did, because in one of the episodes Marissa does express that gender roles, she likes that they like to talk about gender roles and how that looks like. So I think they did have extensive ideas around this. I don't think that those ideas were also brought up in the sexual sense as well, because we see this happening when they move out of the pods and into the apartments, but we'll get to that bit. When we do get to the pods and we see Marissa getting to a point where she needs to make a decision, and we find out the boys both know who Marissa's dating outside of themselves, which is Broden and Ramses. And when Ramses finds out that Broden is his competition, immediately you see the fear in his eyes as to like, what the heck is going on? Like, why? And straight away retreats. Whereas Broden's very much like, oh my god, this is exciting, it's fun. Like, he doesn't see it as a issue, whereas Ramses definitely sees it in the issue. And you can see from the dates that they have after that point. With Broden, he was very like, oh, I know who you're dating. It's like, it's funny how you guys, we're quite similar, but we're different at the same time. And like, kind of bigging up Ramses as well as not dimming his own light. Whereas Ramses' conversation with Marissa, he needed a lot more reassurance as to kind of help him see, okay, I'm still into you, I need that reassurance. And he asks for it, which is fair. But that's a lot of work that she had to put into him, which will continue to come up if this is an issue within the pods. So I feel like on first glance, I think Broden probably would have been a better match for her, just off of the pod experience, just because there was a lot of similarities and he felt more confident in who he was and his idea of his masculinity. Whereas Ramses, I don't think really had a solid understanding of who he was as a man in the masculine sense. And he does say in his VT that when people do see him, they question like his masculinity. And I think he still hasn't developed his idea of what his masculinity is. So when he is flexible with staying at home and looking after kids, I'm not sure if he's fully understood his role in that, or if he's just saying it because he feels like the kind of woman he wants would want her man to say something like that. But this is all speculative. As I say, every session, I don't know these people. I haven't spoken to these people. They're not my clients. This is just based off of the information that we've been given through the series, on their dates in the pods and whilst they're in their apartments. In one of after Marissa's made up her mind about who she is going to date, she picks Broden, and that interaction with her and Broden, when she ends it, was very calm, he very much respected her ideas and was still praising Ramses and was very excited about how that goes. And I think in that instance, we saw a bit of a secure attachment with him and him just understanding, okay, she's got her decision and I respect that decision. So when she went into the next date with Ramses to tell him that she had picked him over Broden, he praises Brandon, but at the same time, is comparing himself to Broden through that praise. So he says, oh, he's a really nice guy, and I can see how you like we're similar, but we're very different. And when I look at him, I think, how the hell are you chatting to him, but also chatting to me? We're two different people. But doesn't really kind of, there's always a comparison between the two. Broden, when they had that chat, Broden was very much like, oh, I'm so happy for you guys are going to be great together, da, 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 just praising the interactions that they had, and not putting Ramses down, but more accepting that she had made her choice, whereas Ramses was the complete opposite. And this is where I start to think, oh, is he a little bit more critical of himself because of his insecurities, that he's presenting it in a certain way, or presenting himself in a certain way for Marissa at that point. And it was very interesting because he says in himself that he's very critical of himself, and it comes from the relationship between him and his dad being quite critical. But that starts to reflect into their relationship when they move out. So I think one of the things that kind of planted a seed very early on in their relationship, after they saw each other, they were both very excited, very happy. I think this was probably the most ecstatic reveal that I've seen. Marissa was so excited to see him, and was very happy with how he looked. And I think that gave him a little bit of comfort in the physical, because when she physically saw him, she was excited for it. And so I think in her head, it was the full package, the kind of guy that I want. He had the looks, and the kind of future that we want kind of aligns. So that to her, it was the full package. To him, he was very excited to see her as well. Very good, very happy, very great. I think where that breakdown happens is when they first have their first conversation, when they get into Mexico in the hotel room, and Marissa says, like, you're the guy that I would usually want to date, but never really dated. And I think when she said that, it kind of planted a little bit of doubt in his head, because she's never dated someone like him. So there's going to be a gap of learning with anyone else, like anything else. If there is something new, there's going to be a gap of learning how to deal with those kinds of situations. And secondly, there was also, she described him as soft in that conversation. And I think when he heard soft, he heard, oh, emasculated, I'm being emasculated. But she then went on to say, I like that about you. I don't like the hyper masculine man. I want to be with someone who's soft and I can be myself around. So those things kind of, like, you could see that it was planting seeds, but they were, in order for him to, he didn't really mention it in that scenario. He kind of just like glossed over it and just kissed her. And I think this is where we might start to see the beginnings of him using physical affection as a way to self-soothe in situations where he felt uncomfortable, which we'll later get onto when they move back to DC and have conversations around living together. We see one of their bigger arguments, which is, we don't see it on screen, but we see the results of what happened after that argument, which was Marissa feeling a certain way about not being touched in certain scenarios. And I think she mentions to him, like, I'm just not feeling like that. And I think from the first instance, we see Marissa always being happy and bubbly and everything else. And I think in that scene, that was the first time we see her having like a low, kind of chilled day. And I've later on found out she actually has a chronic illness that also will affect her mood and her and how she behaves. And she also has ADHD as well. So there's going to be times where she's going to be overstimulated, she's going to be in pain, she's going to be a little bit more less herself. And she did say that she had these conversations in the pods, in the interview that she had with Glamour. But those weren't shown to us, but I just know this from the interview that she did. So from that instance, when she was talking about all the about women being in relationships and men leaving when they get sick and stuff, I think that really hit her personally. So she knew the stats around those things because it was something that could affect her because of her chronic illness. So I think when you do have those things and you have someone who is quite affectionate and is dependent on that affection for their reassurance, it kind of gives you a bit of a tug, which we see in that conversation when they are talking about the sex that they're having, and if it's going to be like this or not, and him managing his expectations around sex. And I think this is more of a love language thing, because I think from their interactions, even from their reveal, they're very tactile, very touchy. So I think physical touch is probably one of their higher love languages, just from watching them interact together. And I think the more I've watched their interactions, the more I see that they soothe using physical touch with each other, and they try to co-regulate using physical touch with each other. And I think when Marissa kind of pulled away physically a little bit when she wasn't feeling great, that uneased Ramses and kind of gave him a little bit of a rocky foundation, which started to appear in little cracks and stuff. But we also see like him not being very active in the house. So like when Marissa's gone to like school, which she says she had to travel quite a bit to come in and out of school, and every day she was traveling at least 3 hours to and from school, she was tired in some of those instances. And there's going to be times when your partner doesn't have the physical energy to always be affectionate and tactile with you. So in those times she wasn't feeling it, and in that time it gave Ramses a bit of uneasiness around their situation. Another instance we see when they do come back to DC is when they're talking about the military and how they feel about how Ramses feels about the military, and how Marissa sees her military, considering she was in the military. He said that he couldn't forgive her if she went back into the military. And I think when she heard this, she was kind of like, the military is where I grew up, it's my life, and it's a part of me. It's not all of me, but it is a part of me. So if you can't accept that part of me, that means you don't accept all of me. And she was willing to look past that. And I think it's because she has an anxious attachment style, so she wanted to hold on to whatever she could, in order to hold on to the relationship she was going to do. But from those instances onwards, we could see there was a misalignment with their actual values, because he values justice and all these things, social justices and all these things, whereas Marissa grew up in the military, also values social justice, but also sees that the military is part of her, and it's something that certain things that she learnt from the military has shaped her, that she cannot shift. But there's other parts of the military that have bad parts of it that she understands where Ramses is coming from the social justice part of things. So she understands him, but it doesn't seem like he understands her point of view, and understanding that, okay, you grew up in this world, and in order for me to be with you, I have to understand your world. And there was no real listening to what she wanted to do in those situations, or what she wanted to express in those situations. So she kind of had to keep on standing on her point, but also like ending conversations without having closure on those things. And those things are big things, considering you grew up like this. And if you have kids together, she's going to be talking about her past in the military. She's going to be talking about her parents' past in the military. So it's understanding that this is not going to be a topic that you are just going to be able to brush off. It's a topic that's going to always be there. And you can have your views on it, but if you don't accept that part of her, which is a big part of her, then there's going to be issues in the relationship. So I think for Marissa, she kind of brushed those things off in order to have her husband and the kind of lifestyle that she wanted to transition into. You could see that she was very much dreaming of her future and really focusing on the potential that Ramses had to fulfill that future, rather than listening to what he was saying in the here and now and how that here and now could also affect the future. It was more, well, he said this, this and this, so I'm going to stick to this, this and this, which is, oh, he will stay home looking after the kids whilst I'm working. He'll help with the chores and he would manage this and he'll manage that. But she was focused on those promises, but not what he was saying in the here and now, which was his actual values and what he actually valued. When I watched their time together, I think the breakup was the most heartbreaking thing I've seen on Love is Blind. Like, they had the most ecstatic reveal, but the most like heart-wrenching, painful breakup as well. So it was kind of like, wow, this is so crazy. But we see this breakup and we're like, oh my god, what happened between these two? Because it was like, from the pod, it seemed like this would have been a perfect match if they had both aligned in all the things that they had said in the pods. But it seemed like when we came into the real world, things shifted. And I think things do shift when you're living with people. You understand people a little bit more, you get to know them a little bit more, and then you make up your decision. From a wall, you can be as fake or as real as you want to be, but it's depending on what you're saying. Whereas in real life, when you're with someone, body language alone will tell you something else, if someone believes something or not, or if they're happy with the situation that they're in or not, because you can feel the energy. Whereas when you're in the pods, there's a little bit of a distance between the two of you, in that sense. So their breakup was like, oh my god, we could see how much pain and anguish that Marissa was in. We don't really see much of that pain being reflected into Ramses, but I think it's because there was a switch off much earlier for him than it was with Marissa, because Marissa didn't see it coming. She felt like she was blindsided, whereas Ramses was definitely debating this way before. And I think it even started from the honeymoon, when she described him as soft. And I think from then on, there was little seeds that kept on being, the seed was planted, but it felt like it was being watered in little instances, with the military conversation, with the sexual intimacy conversations, things like that started building up. And I think also when he met up with her mum, and the relationship that she had with her mum and how that played off and how protective the mum was of her, it felt, you could see that scared him a little bit, and it was a little bit like backtaking. And I think the mum kind of had it right in a sense that she could see that he was a little bit more laid back around life, which I think attracted that to Marissa, was attracted to that because she's quite full on with what, like, work and stuff. But she was also, the mum was very much understanding that, oh, she actually has ambition, she's doing things with her life. Is this going to be a problem for someone like Ramses? And it seemed like Ramses was really trying to always paint the image of the good guy, the nice guy, and we all know how I feel about the nice guy. The nice guy is the one who tries to say things and do things in order to please people, rather than saying the kind thing, or the thing that's going to be difficult in the moment, but at least everyone knows where they're at. And he continued to play the nice guy throughout the whole season, I feel. And I think that's because when you look at Ramses's conversations, a lot of the time it's based off of the idea of who he wants to be, and who he feels like who he feels that person wants him to be, because he's not really strong in his identity of himself, which we see the symptoms of this in the pods when he is comparing himself to Broden. It is, if you're sure of yourself, you don't have that strong pull to compare yourself to other people. You're very confident in who you are and you're happy with where you're at, and there doesn't need to be a comparison. Whereas him, he's still trying to work out his idea of masculinity, and it is being questioned along the way. Not in a overt way, but there's certain things that were said, like Marissa's mum saying, "I'll chop your balls off if you hurt her, or break her heart." And then like him standing up for himself in regards to the military conversation, him standing up for himself in the contraceptive conversation, him trying to get a read on how much affection he'll be getting. It sounded very much like, what is this relationship doing for me? It wasn't a very collective, oh, how is this relationship going to help these social justices that I'm into? How is this relationship going to build on this or that, on this, on the values that I do have? It was more of, what is it doing for me? And it felt very selfish. And even in his proposal, it was very much, you accept me, you make me be who I want to be. It was very much a very self-centered proposal. Whereas Marissa, when she was talking about her fears about the relationship and how it would end and stuff, and how even her mum sees her mum was like, "Oh, be patient." She said to him, I think she said this to Brody in one of the conversations that they had in the pods, that the mum would say, be patient with her and don't hurt her. So I think the mum has always been very protective of her, and she's known this. So when she was introducing him, Ramses, to her mum, she knew she was going to be protective, and she does mention that to him, that she is going to be very protective and like maybe be a little bit rough with you. So just like, hold your own. And in that situation, you see him crumble because he doesn't know how to remove himself from the nice guy image, which the mom sees through, and the mom calls out in there and then, and you see him crumble in that situation. And I think from then on, like, it just turned into a downward spiral, and that's when we get to the moment where they are talking about the wedding, and Ramses is having all these doubts because he's had a conversation with other people and now realizes that his ex-girlfriend, his ex-wife, how hurt she was from that relationship, which was mind-blowing, because it was like, this happened about 5 years ago, so why is it that it's now coming up a few days before you're going to get married? So it was very interesting to see how influenced he was from the outside noise. First in the pods when he finds out about Broden, very aware of his competition now. You see how he reacts to that, and then you see how he reacts to the lack of affection. We see how he reacts also to the cousins' conversation. So it's all external things that he's reacting to, because his own security in himself has been a little bit shaken, and he doesn't know how to stand on what he believes is true to him. And I think in some cases it's a case of, I'm not enough, from the critical voice that the dad had of him, that probably makes him this. And I don't think I'm saying all of this, but I don't think he's a horrible person. I just think there's certain things that he needs to work on to understand who he is and what he brings to a relationship and be confident in that. Whereas Marissa, you can see she's done that work and knows where her downfall is. And her biggest fear was not being accepted for those things, not being accepted or not being classed as too much, which she mentions in the pods, and that's being her fear. And the way the relationship ends with him saying, "I feel like you'll be too much for me," was heartbreaking to see, because it was like, I told you this was my fear from the beginning, and I told you guys only date me in the beginning because of all this energy, and then they tell me that I'm too much. If I'm too much, let me know. But 2 days before the wedding, we're still deciding wedding songs, and you pick wedding song and you tell me everything's fine, but it's not fine. So you weren't being honest with me as well. So it's kind of seeing this pattern, and her trying to hold on at the end saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?" And I was just like, girl, let him go, because he's not ready for you, and he's not enough for you because he's not enough for himself. And sometimes we have to recognize that some of our relationships, sometimes people are getting into relationships so that they can feel enough, and sometimes you being what they think is successful could rub them up the wrong way and make them feel less than, and try and belittle you in other ways, and try to shift things into conversation. So I think being aware of these things sometimes could be really true to it. And we see this play out in this season with Marissa and Ramses, and it's sad to see another couple going through this, saying how they're feeling in the beginning in the pods, and then it actually coming to pass in real life when it does happen. So yeah, it was a very interesting couple match, and we could see it unraveling, and how it is. And I also watched the reunion, and I felt like Marissa had a lot of anger towards Nick in relation to Taylor, but I don't think that anger was really her anger for Nick. I think that anger might have been for Ramses, but she didn't want to put that onto Ramses because she wanted to keep telling herself, which she does say in the glamour interview, that she wanted for her own sanity, she wants to remember that he's not a horrible person. He just has to do a lot of work on himself. We see when you want to put someone in that box, you don't really want to attack them for the hurt that they've put you through. But I think in that instance, the hurt that she was experiencing with Ramses, she ended up taking out on Nick, because she felt like Nick might have been she was a little bit more detached from Nick to do that. Certain conversations she should have been having with Ramses, she didn't have. And we saw Ramses very quiet in the reunion, and shrink back into himself. So I feel like he knew it could have gotten wild, but because Marissa also didn't play into those narratives and kind of left it kind of fizzled out. Their interactions was very much like one that I enjoyed watching, because it gave me insights to seeing, like, if someone feels like they're not enough in a relationship, again, they hold that in their relationship and haven't done the work around that core belief, there is going to be issues in that relationship. So if you do suffer with feeling less than or trying to identify who you are in a relationship, I'd say book for therapy. Find a therapist who will look at these core wounds with you and help you through them, so that you understand more about yourself and how these are all contributing to your current relationships, not just romantic relationships, but there's at some point this is going to show up in your friendships, in your relationships with your parents, in your relationships with colleagues in all sense of life. You have different points where these are going to show up, so it's better to deal with it now so that going forward you can manage those relationships and your anxieties around those relationships. So yeah, guys, this is Ramses and Marissa's story, and I'm sad it ended the way it did, but I'm glad that they're not in a relationship where it would have faded out again later on down the line, because it wasn't healthy in the first place. So on that note, I'm going to love and leave you guys, and thank you so much for watching up to the end of the episodes. And I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, getting in contact, all these things. I really appreciate you all, and look forward to another episode next week on another couple. So on that note, guys, I'll see you later. Take care. Bye.